Well, joining me now from Cape Town is Thomas Walters. He's an opposition member of parliament with the DA who helps oversee rural development and land reform. And from Johannesburg, we have political analyst Oliver Dickson. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Let me start with you, Thomas Walters. Tell me why you disagree with your fellow MPs who voted for this resolution.
Well, firstly, our constitution, and the proposal is to amend our constitution to make expropriation without compensation possible. Our constitution was not drafted to protect the property rights of a few. It was actually to prevent the kind of arbitrary expropriation of property rights that we saw during the apartheid system. It's actually there to protect the property rights of newly included people in the economy. And if you look at some of the proposals that are being touted around in South Africa, what you actually have is the state expropriating private property rights to itself. We believe that it fundamentally undermines our democracy. We believe it's actually an expropriation of rights, not just of land.
Right.
And we believe that our constitution was drafted to have land reform with justice.
Right. Oliver, looking at the context of South Africa, it's clear land is a problem. Land reform is a problem. The majority don't have enough of land, but is this the right way to go about it? Expropriation without compensation and changing the constitution?
Look, the alternatives have clearly proven to be ineffective, inefficient, and have proven to not be able to transform the life of many South Africans, millions of South Africans. So if you ask, is this the right method? We first have to ask ourselves, has the alternatives been exhausted? And it is the case in South Africa that the alternatives have been exhausted, and we now have to resort to amending the constitution to be able to create an equitable, just and fair South Africa. And land is at the heart of equitability, justice and fairness. However, I just want to disagree with Thomas there. The expropriation of land is not the expropriation of rights, because here we have to be very clear about what is being done here. People's private homes are not being expropriated. Insofar as their private homes occupy land that's unjustly acquired, we can have a conversation there. But we're talking about land here to rebuild and redesign and reconfigure the South African economy. That's to say, we're looking at commercial land, we're looking at agrarian land, we're looking at lands that will enable black people in South Africa to enter the property development market, to enter the agriculture market, and that's where the conversation is. Right. So if you living on land that's 1,000 square meters, that's not what we're talking about here.
Okay. Now, for some, expropriation without compensation doesn't mean anything other than land theft. Thomas, let me give you what the president said. Ramaphosa has said the policy will be undertaken in a way that doesn't threaten food security or economic growth, and they talk of unused land remaining a target. Why don't you believe the president?
Well, first of all, there's about 4,000 farms in South Africa that is already in the hands of the state, with a 90% failure rate of state management and ensuring that beneficiaries get that land. So I'm not quite sure what facts the other gentleman on the debate is working with. He clearly is not from the government. He's a political analyst. It's a pity that the governing party isn't here to answer some of these questions. For starters, the proposal, and you can look at what the ANC is saying in the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee. You can look at what the proposals are from the grouping within the ANC that's moving this. We're talking of expropriate or changing Section 25 of the Constitution that refers to property rights. It's not only land that is contained in that particular section of the Constitution. And the comment that alternatives have been exhausted, I completely disagree. In fact, where the Democratic Alliance governs, we have a 63% success rate with land reform projects compared to a 90% failure rate where the ANC governs. Okay. So alternatives, successful alternatives, in fact, exist. And we are not dealing with the argument about land ceilings, and I'm not sure who the we is that's being referred to. That none of that is actually in a concrete proposal in part of the constitutional process. Currently, we're dealing with state, and the argument on the table is state expropriation of private property, which could be anything, not just land.
Yeah, and
so to speak with authority as to what the ANC government is saying, I believe is frankly speculation.
Okay, and you posed something interesting there. Unfortunately, we did reach out to multiple members of the ANC. None of them wanted to appear on the program.
That is usually the case.
That's a little crinkle, and unfortunately, I'm not happy that they're not here. But we mix it up anyway, because I'm going to bring in another interesting voice here, a different perspective. Joining us now from Johannesburg is Siphesihle Jele. He's the Secretary General of Socialist Political Party, Black First, Land First, or BLF, as you can see on his T-shirt there in Joburg. Siphesihle, help me understand, why do you think this is a good thing? Isn't there a better way to address the injustices of the past rather than land grabs?
Our belief, it has long been our belief that there's nothing that happens in this world that happens out of land. So everything that we do, everything that happens out of land. Land is dignity. So if the black people of South Africa do not get land, they will never then get wealth. So we cannot equally distribute our wealth of this country without redistributing land. Because all the businesses, all the minerals underneath and the agricultural land, all the properties are done on top and underneath land. So we believe that land is dignity. And that's why it was dispossessed from us, because those who dispossessed our forefathers understood it very well that if we were to conquer these people, we should take their land from them. So we believe that yes.
Okay, Oliver, do you agree with BLF?
Yes.
I'm presuming you don't agree with all of what BLF stands for, but on this issue, do you agree with them?
No, I agree with as far as the sentiment of dignity and land is concerned, because that is a real problem in South Africa. But I don't believe with the operation BLF suggests, and I think you may have asked him that question unfairly, because I don't think what we're speaking about is land grabs. Land grabs is what happened in Zimbabwe, where self-entitled political elite went and chased away white farmers off of the land. Here we're talking about a sophisticated transfer of land into the coffers of the state, and the state will redistribute that land fairly and equitably across the country. That's not a land grab system.
Okay. Let me take that and pose it as my final question to Siphesihle. Siphesihle, do you want a repeat of Zimbabwe in South Africa, or are you willing to accept the legalities of whatever comes through that committee and whatever then proceeds from Parliament afterwards?
Okay. Just on the 2 points. Firstly, the last point of accepting what the committee is currently doing, we do welcome it. But it is our firm belief that politicians will never give us land. The ANC and the EFF will just politicking for electioneering purposes. By come next year elections, we will not have got land from the DA and the ANC on their motion. So their motion, we welcome it as a positive step in the right direction, but we know that they were just playing politics. So we put actions into that rhetoric. That's the first part. And the second part is that on the Zimbabwe question, if we were to highlight that aspect, that the Zimbabwean land redistribution program was a success, but the only thing that was sort of a stagnating of the process was due to the mere fact that the European people who run the economies of our countries here in Africa then sabotaged the economy of Zimbabwe so that they can set.
The Zimbabwean economy collapsed as a result of Mugabe's economic policies. Nobody from the outside collapsed the economy.
It collapsed. It collapsed because it was attacked. If it was not attacked, it was going to be a good success stories. And that's what investors or the European and your Western countries do not want, because if it was a success in Zimbabwe, we are going to do it in South Africa. It was going to be a success. So they made an example with Zimbabwe by attacking and collapsing their economy, because they run all these economies through the central banks and all the other investment that they make. So if, for example, they just said, we're going to let Zimbabwe run their program, we're not going to attack or sabotage their program, it was going to be a success, which the Western and the European countries do not want to happen in the Southern African region.
Okay, that's the BLF perspective. Siphesihle Jele, I thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Let's get the perspective now from Zimbabwe, where former President Robert Mugabe, as you heard, oversaw a policy of land expropriation without compensation. In Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, we have farmer David Conolly. He had his Centenary Figtree farm taken away from him. David, good to have you on the program. When you see and hear what's happening south of the border, do you see similarities with Zimbabwe?
Yes, I see a lot of similarities with Zimbabwe, and it's very interesting to listen to your other panelists. the major problem up in Zimbabwe and why it failed, and I think it was Victor from the DA, was the destruction of property rights. Now, when you destroy property rights, it has a cascading effect right through the economy of the country. And as a result of taking the land, they were unable to pass on property rights. When they took land without compensation, they couldn't pass on property rights to the people that came onto the land. As a result of that, there was no bank that would finance any operation on that land. So it's a cascading effect of taking land without compensation that has the major impact. And that's basically what destroyed our economy.
Right.
You know, it was very interesting to hear your panelist there, Siphesihle, say that the West had destroyed the economy. The economy was destroyed by the lack of property right. I remember when my farm got designated, going into my bank manager, as you do need with commercial agriculture. It's a very high-tech business these days. You need to get loans, and my bank manager said to me, "You've got a very good track record, but the problem is that your property no longer is bankable, and so therefore I cannot forward to you the requirements that you need for the coming season." So that was the problem. My farm, although I was there and it was operating, it basically collapsed because I couldn't get finance. And the experience that we've had now is 98%, other than the ruling elite, who have taken farms and put pressure on the banks to give them money to finance their operations, haven't been able to farm commercially. And as a result, we've become a basket case.
Okay, let me get one final response then from Siphesihle. Siphesihle, you're listening to a man who's saying, don't do it, South Africa, because once my property rights were taken away from me, my farm collapsed, and of course the economy collapsed. Do you have any sympathy for that perspective, Siphesihle?
Yes, the economy collapses only if it's under attack. So
what if it's under attack from within by bad policies, Siphesihle?
From within and external, there's what we term here in South Africa white monopoly capital. Those are people who run our economy. So if they are not happy about anything that's happening in South Africa, they then attack the economy. We saw with the situation where the rand was attacked, where South Africa lost about 50 billion after President Zuma, using his prerogative, reshuffled a minister whom he employs, he can also unemploy.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's only if it's under attack when it collapses.
Certainly. You don't. So you don't see any agency within the actions themselves, Siphesihle. Thanks so much for that perspective. Let me go to Thomas Walters and let me just ask very finally, sort of big picture in terms of the politics. It seems as if the ANC has been dragged further to the left because of the EFF and the fact that it lost a lot of supporters to the EFF. And this is why you have a policy like this. Realistically speaking, come August, are we going to see that committee come out with a report that is maybe a bit of a compromise? And maybe when it comes to expropriation without compensation, maybe it's only going to be little parts of land that are unused and everybody will be happy. Is that how it's going to play out?
Look, there's clearly a tension within the ANC between people that defended property rights. Just last year, the ANC defended the Constitution in Parliament, and now we have a different situation. So there's a tension within the ANC. Certainly from my party, we are prepared to work with anyone in the government that wants property rights for the poor entrenched in our economy. Incidentally, the government's own panel investigating land reform in South Africa did specifically said the Constitution of South Africa is not an obstacle. We all support that the legacy of apartheid, the lack of the dignity that got destroyed, that needs to be fixed, and that is something we need to build our country on that basis. But there's 17 million hectares of land in South Africa available now in the hands of government or in communal land areas where black South Africans can get private property rights now. So it's clearly a distraction. It's clearly a lightning conductor ahead of an election.
Right, and a lot of that is being met with opposition by the Zulu King and so on. And that's almost a separate discussion, and we don't have time to get into it. Gentlemen, I thank you all for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you. Thomas Walters, Siphesihle Jele, David Conolly, and of course, Oliver Dickson, who also joined us. Thanks for joining us on The Newsmakers.